It's 4 o'clock on a Monday, and you know what that means, don't you? It's time for another exciting episode of Taxi TV Live. This week, live from beautiful Westlake Studios, Mr. Al Machera. Yay! And thank you, fake band. Thank you, fake audience. Hi, Al.
How you doing, sir?
I'm good, thanks. I'm actually a little scared to death. I hate doing remotes, but I'm really glad to be doing one here. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
There you guys are. The monitor's a little far away from me, so I'm not going to do my usual hellos, but I'm excited to be here. Al's become a good friend over the last, I think, 3 years probably, and something like that.
Yeah.
And we are two old studio dogs that when we get together love talking about all things with mics and wires. And the room we're sitting in is Studio B. Here, I'm going to duck out of the shot for a second and let you see. So this is one of two rooms that Michael Jackson used on a regular basis.
Yeah, this was the second Westlake building built, and Studio A and B. Studio A, of course, was where they did Thriller, but Studio B was in the process of being built, and it got a lot of use as well during the Thriller years. So a lot of like the overflow from the A room got cut in here. I think the drums to Billie Jean were cut in the drum room in the back, and a lot of cool things in this room.
You can feel the history in this place. And I'm not going to pop off the camera to show you guys what's above us right now, but I'll tell you about it. There are a pair of JBL 4311s above us in the ceiling. And Al, why don't you tell them why their speakers mounted in the ceiling blowing down at the floor? I think this is a great thing.
Quincy Jones loved these speakers, so instead of putting them on the console, he used to love to lean back in his chair and just kind of listen. So they put them up in the ceiling so he could just turn them on, lean back, and listen to what was going on.
It's a trip. First time I walked in one of these rooms, I thought, were those up there for quad back in the day?
Yeah. So we have them in here. We have them in A as well.
I love 4311s because that's what I grew up on. They're not everybody's favorite monitor, but once you're used to them,
Yep.
you know?
Yep. We sparked them up when we redid Studio A at the end of last year, and we listened to a couple things through it, and it's definitely the different sounding monitor for sure.
Yeah, once you're used to like
certain things sounded great in it, and then
Yeah.
the other things didn't sound so well, so great. So we were trying to figure out, is it the monitor, or is it just that sound? I mean, when you played stuff from the 70s. And the 80s,
It sounded
great, and then when you kind of got into more bass heavy stuff, it wasn't translating as well.
not enough bass coming out of them.
Yeah.
Interesting, because they had a 12-inch woofer. Wow.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So, all right, I've got I came prepared today. Is the audio good on your end, guys? Can you hear me? I hope so. Oh, yeah, they're talking about 4311, so you can hear us. Good. Yeah, we got plenty on the meter. So, yeah, some of the people have recorded here, and this is just a small sample of just some of those artists. Michael Jackson, Rihanna, Shakira, Justin Timberlake, Madonna, Neo, Donna Summer, Alanis Morissette, Boston, Van Halen. Those must have been fun sessions. Frank Ocean, Josh Groban, Quincy Jones, Dave Matthews, Kelly Clarkson, Nas, Kesha, Kesha Cole?
Keisha Cole.
Keisha Cole.
Yeah.
Aaliyah, Missy Elliott, Britney Spears, Nine Inch Nails, Justin Bieber, Fifth Harmony, and many, many, many more. So, yeah, this place it's history. And the thing... Well, I'll get into that later. I don't want to give away some of my questions later. But I want to talk about you. Where did you grow up? Clearly from New York by the accent.
Mm-hmm. Grew up in Brooklyn, New York. Pretty much my young adult up until about 17. And then my family decided it was it was a rough place to grow up. My father was getting, a little older, and he didn't want all the hassle of, having to worry about me being out. And my senior year moved us up to the Catskill Mountains, so I spent a year or two up there.
Where? What town?
In Monticello.
Oh, okay.
Monticello. Cool. And, finished my high school year up there. And then moved back to the city after a short stint up there, about 2 years.
The whole family moved back?
Just me.
Okay.
Just couldn't get enough of, just too quiet up there.
You missed dollar pizza slices.
Yeah, that too. But it's great because I had my friends growing up, and then I had my friends from Monticello. So I still, I'm still in touch with a bunch of them. So it's like a whole new community of people that I still keep in touch with. And moved back to the city for a little bit, and then back down to Miami to start my career in audio.
So, what did you want to be when you were in, let's say, grade school or junior high school? What did you want to be? Did you know at that point that you wanted to grow up in
no,
be an engineer?
No, not at all. I think growing up, my natural progression would have been to become an electrician or a carpenter. Right, my father, all of my families are tradesmen. So
okay.
My brother-in-law was electrician, and he was about 16 years older than I was. So I was always kind of following him around. My father was a machine shop machinist and built things out of metal, and so it was all about construction. Both of them were great carpenters, so
which came in handy in your
it still does.
You can't own one of these without knowing what all the trades do.
That's right. It actually
cool.
comes in really helpful. And in my own kind of little way, I always say to people, if you're a builder, you're a builder, right? So I started off as maybe building wiring stuff, or building, kitchens and bathrooms and remodeling stuff. But really, you're just building when you're working on a song, you're building, right? Yeah. You're creating something, and it's just kind of the same. It's the same skills, just in a different way.
I've often compared it to cooking.
Yeah, same thing. I love to cook too.
Yeah, me too.
I love to cook too.
So, how did you end up in Miami? Did you go there specifically to get into the studio business?
Yes.
Okay.
So what happened is, growing up, I was obsessed with music. I loved it. I was in Brooklyn, New York, in a place called East Flatbush.
Everybody knows Flatbush.
Yeah, Flatbush, right? So I grew up there, and just a melting pot of everything was in front of me. I had, the hip hop was just being born. The neighborhood that I grew up in was mostly West Indies. So it was Jamaican, Haitian, just a mix of everyone. So had a lot of reggae and island music coming, in the area, in the neighborhood. My sisters, I have two older sisters that are 16 years older than I am, and they were prime during the Rolling Stones, Beatles era. So that whole sound of the 70s, 60s and 70s were like where I grew up,
right.
with them. My father, who was a little older, was into big band. My mother was Jerry Vale,
classic.
Yes, Frank Sinatra, Jerry Vale. And my grandmother was like nuts, being like older. She was nuts for Elvis Presley, right?
Wow.
Like, so that was my first record ever. So we used to go to this little movie theater called Midwood, and they used to have like 50-cent movies on like Wednesdays, and she used to take me, and we'd always stop by a record store, and like my first record was an Elvis Presley record, because that's what she loved.
You and I every time I'm with you on the ride back to Calabasas, I think about how similar we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There was an instant attraction. Not that trying to make more out of this than I should, but
that'll be the video after this one.
Right. But my grandmother took me to see Jailhouse Rock at a 50-cent movie theater when I was a kid. Yeah, and I fell in love with Elvis.
Oh yeah, we used to go see all the old Elvis movies, and it was cool.
I couldn't believe that my grandmother liked it. I was almost embarrassed to be sitting next to her, because his dancing was very sexualized,
Yep.
and it was just like way too young and hip for a grandmother to be into. I don't
Oh,
know.
she was like a nut. She was a Elvis Presley nut. We used to watch all the movies on TV, and she was just way advanced for her age. She was a cool lady. She lived next door to us, so we lived in the house next door. We bought the house next door. I grew up actually born in her house. We lived there for a stint. And then we moved out. We moved to an apartment, and then we bought the house next door to her. So
Classic.
It was super cool because she was, she got me into music. She taught me how to cook. So I was just at grandma's house all the time. It was a big house, and it was just her and I.
Wow.
So it was a cool.
Playing Elvis records and hanging out and cooking.
Yep, that's right.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, what was it that made you go to Miami to get into the studio business, and how old were you at the time?
So growing up, one of the things my father and mother had bought me was I don't know if you guys remember, but there was like, if you had like a component stereo system, which like you had a tuner, there was an Akai tuner, and then whatever the I can't remember it was an 8-track, there was a cassette deck, and there was a turntable. And then I just kind of like started buying 8-tracks and albums, and I would just sit in my room with headphones on and listen for hours and hours and hours, and just kind of like try to dissect what I was listening to, right? So I'd go from the Beatles to Stevie Wonder to Rush, to like pretty much anything that I was kind of like drawn to that day or that week, and I just kind of dissect it. And then one day I turned an album around and I saw that it said recording engineer, and I was like, what's a recording engineer, right? So I kind of so being with no access at all to the music industry, I had no idea. Mm-hmm. So I was just trying to figure out. It was before the internet, so there was no like, let me pick up my phone and see what a recording engineer is. So I figured it out, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I was sitting in my living room one day, and I saw a commercial come on TV, and it was for the school that was just pretty much brand new in Miami. On was it Washington? Is where that club always used to be? That club that changed hands 100 times? Ocean Drive, and then what's that next street that I think it was Washington.
I do remember a street named Washington.
I think it was Washington, right? Yeah. So it was literally right in South Beach. It was a school that an industry veteran named Mert Paul.
Okay.
He started, and it was video and audio.
What year?
This was 88.
Okay. Wow, that was the year I moved out here.
Yeah, so
okay.
88. So there was a commercial on TV. It was like, you want to make records, you want to get into the audio industry. And I was like, yep. And I called, and within a week I had my Honda Prelude packed, and I was driving down to Miami from New York.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so you went to school there, and did that place hook you up with an internship or something? How did you get your first job in a studio, and what was your first job?
So it's 30 years into it. I always say it's all about opportunity. The door of opportunity is going to open, and you have to be ready to get through it, right? So the reason I say that is because, like I said, I had a car, right? So my Honda Prelude, I drove down to Miami, and the halfway through my year of courses, and that time I was taking audio and video courses, right? Okay. So I was doing both programs, and halfway through the courses, I was walking down the hallway, and one of my friends that I was in class with from Connecticut, he was in with a placement counselor.
Okay.
And I saw him sitting there, I just popped my head in. I knew her as well, so I just popped in. I said, I popped my head in and said, hey, how you guys doing? And she said, oh, Al, 1 second. You have a car, right? And I go, yeah, I have a car. And she's like, can you drive Cornell to an intern interview at a studio? And I said, sure, no problem. So I drove him, and being in Miami, it's super hot, so you don't want to sit outside. And so I I walked in with him, and I sat in the lobby of the studio. It was called Studio Center. And I sat in the lobby, and he went in and interviewed for like 20, 30 minutes. And when they were walking out, the owner of the studio who interviewed him, his name was Steve Schiffo, he asked, "Who's this guy?" And Cornell said, "That he's my friend. He drove me here.
He's my driver.
He's
my
driver.
Uber guy."
And so that's really. So he's like, "Well, are you in school with him?" He's like, I said, "Yeah, of course, yes." And he's like, "Do you want an internship too?" And I said, "Yeah, I would love one." So he's like, "Great, so you show up
right
tomorrow." Right
place, right time.
Yep. And my interview was literally 5 seconds.
Wow.
So I showed up the next
You
day.
have a car, you got the job.
That's right. And that's what happened. And I showed up we both showed up the next day, and it was easier because we could come together and leave together. And he was more of like an artist.
Yeah.
So he lasted. I mean, I think they told him to clean the bathrooms or clean the gold records or the platinum records on the wall, and he was like, "I don't do that."
What?
So he was done like 2 days, I think it was, maybe a day or two, and I wound up lasting. I ended up staying there for a while.
Wow.
Yeah.
I cannot believe that he wasn't willing to do that stuff.
Yeah, he wasn't. He's like, I don't want to do that stuff.
Did he think that, like, the day after he got the internship, that they were going to make him a producer on a platinum record?
I don't know. That was probably his mindset of like, there's only certain things I'm going to do.
Wow. Yeah, not destined to work in a studio because, as you and I both know, you've got to do whatever is asked of you and do it.
Up and do it.
Yeah, and do it well.
That's
I mean, like a zero defect environment. At least, that's the way I was raised. I'm sure that's the way you train guys here. Wow. To quote Hermione from Harry Potter, "What an idiot." Sorry, Cornell, if you're watching today.
Maybe it just wasn't his path. Maybe he was looking. I think his purpose for being there was more to figure out how to record better for himself, to record himself as an artist. So his mindset wasn't, I want to become an engineer. Like his mindset wasn't the service industry. His mindset was, I'm going to get better, so I know when someone serves me if it's right or wrong.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Do you remember how you felt in that moment when you left that place after getting an internship in a real studio? Did you feel...
I was kind of in shock, I think.
All
it happened so quick. I mean, it really happened so fast. I don't even remember if I was stumbling in my words or anything. I was just kind of like, I would love it. We didn't even go back to the office. He was just like, "Okay, just come tomorrow."
Wow. Did you finish school, or did the internship just totally take over your life?
No, I finished school. So that was about 6 months into it.
Yeah.
I still had another 6 months. Now, what was super interesting is Studio Center had 2 rooms. One was an MCI room over on the east side of Miami, and it was an older room, big live room, smaller control room, and was geared more towards film overdubs and things like that. I think that's where Steve kind of like started the reason for getting into the audio side.
Yeah, that whole neighborhood around Northeast 149th was all like, there was a PBS affiliate there. It was all production and post-production stuff.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that was the older room, and then where we went and interviewed was on the west side, which is Miami Lakes.
Okay.
And that room they had just bought, and it was a studio that had gone bankrupt. They had just bought it. They didn't have the clientele to book it yet. So what was great was I kind of bounced between both buildings, but I wound up being at the west location a lot more. So really I had a pair of keys to an SSL. I had a set of keys to an SSL room, and no clients. So it was really just like I was just in there every day learning as much as I could. I'd try different things. I'd clean things. I'd fix things. I was, we were building little production suites in the other parts of the building. So I was kind of working on that a little bit. So my construction background helped out there. So it was just it just depended on what happened. So I'd go to school in the morning till the midday or so, and maybe hit the beach for an hour, and then after that I'd head into the studio.
How old were you when you actually engineered like a real session?
Well, that's an interesting thing because with Opportunity, I was an intern I think I remember looking it up one time. I was an intern for I think 11 weeks. Maybe it was 9 weeks. I can't remember. It was 9 or 11 weeks. And it was a quick internship. And then I started assisting. And then like literally a couple weeks into assisting, an engineer didn't show up. And I just had to jump in.
Classic.
And then just kind of learn by trial by fire kind of thing.
I think almost everybody who's ever spent any time behind a real console, we all share that story.
And I remember that session like it was yesterday. It was Frank Diaz, a gentleman named Frank Diaz, who was an executive producer for a group called Expose.
Oh, I remember that.
And they were making an Expose record, and that was my first. That's how I cut my teeth.
Wow.
Yeah.
Faking it like you actually knew what he.
I told him I didn't know. I told him straight up. I was like, I'll do my best. He's like, okay, great. And he used to tell. It's funny because when I was engineering, I'd always have a little nickname called Taz, right? And that came from Frank because I was so nervous about that. I'd be moving around the room, and one time I brushed the table that he had a bunch of paper on. I brushed it, and the paper just went and he's like, buddy, you got to calm down. He's like, you're running around here like Tasmanian devil, right? And I know. I said, I'm nervous. I said, I don't know what I'm doing. So I said, so he's like, we'll get there. No worries. He said, we're not doing brain surgery. No one's gonna die. And I said, okay, cool.
Wow, you're lucky that you had
he was super cool.
Yeah.
He was super cool. So then they caught it. They started calling me Taz for the rest of the months.
Thank God it was paper and not cocaine. Which,
That's right.
Would not have been out of order for
That's right.
that
That might
time
have been a little
period in
worse.
the studio. I realized as I was researching you a little bit that you and I have both lived and worked in New York, Miami, and LA.
Mm-hmm.
Just one more thing that we've got in common. So how did you end up out here? And if I remember correctly, I think I read that you went from Miami back to New York.
Went back to New York.
And what was the circumstance surrounding that?
I don't know. Have you ever been in the Miami in the summertime?
Yeah.
I ran like the second time the summer was coming around. I was like, I can't do it again. So
that's why I worked in studios. Lots of air conditioning.
Yeah, and that's great as long as you can get from your house. Like what I couldn't get over is you take a shower, you get dressed, you walk from your front door to your car, and you're like, before you get to your car, you're dripping wet again, and you soaked
Absolutely.
again. You feel nasty, and you're like, okay, why did I even take a shower? But the summers there are kind of brutal.
Yes, they are.
And I wasn't prepared for it. The first time around was rough, and I didn't want to see it happen again. So it was about a year and a half that I was there, and I went back to New York and
Did you have a job lined up in New York?
No, I just went back and I just littered the place with. I probably went to about 50 studios with my resume, dropped them off in person, whether they knew I was coming or not. Tried to set up appointments. They were like, no. So I just showed up.
So that would have been around 90? 1990?
I was 90, yeah.
So what job did you get when
I
you
got three
back?
offers.
Wow.
I got 34th Street Sound, which did a lot of jingles. And that was in Manhattan. I got an offer from Green Street Studios, and that was downtown Manhattan. And I got an offer from a studio called Power Play in Long Island City. And because I didn't have to drive into the city and get on a train and park the car and spend a bunch of money, I took the one in Long Island City, and it turned out to be a great move.
And did you start there as an assistant?
Assistant. I went back to be an assistant.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how long did it take you to graduate to becoming a first engineer, and how did that happen?
I'd say Probably a few months, maybe a month, a couple,
Wow, you're
3
like
months.
the king of the short timeline.
Yeah, you know, I got linked up with some great people, and I had a mentor named Anton, who when I worked with him a lot, and he was an engineer, and because he was also a musician, so he'd always, break into like, pulling out his bass or playing some keyboards. So it was kind of great because we worked really well together, because when he wanted to do that stuff, I could just engineer. I was just engineering. Right. So it was kind of like him being able to step out of the engineering seat into the producer seat, and me engineer. So I kind of had this great transition. And once we started working together, the first thing I did was a record called Organized Confusion. Was a group called Organized Confusion, and it was on Hollywood Basics. I don't know if you remember when Hollywood Records started.
I remember
a hip hop
Hollywood.
label.
I didn't know they
had
Hollywood.
Power
Basics.
Play was a hip hop studio, predominantly hip hop studio.
Okay.
And they made all the early hip hop records: Eric B. Rakim, Nas, Kid and Play, Salt and Pepper, KRS-One, EPMD, all the early hip hop records.
And were you into hip hop at the time? Was that like your?
I mean, I liked hip hop.
Yeah.
It wasn't. I didn't really have. If I would have went to Green Street, I think was doing a little bit of everything, but they were. LL Cool J was making records there. 34th Street Sound, like I said, was making jingles and more advertisement music and things like that. So it really wasn't like I would have done any of them. I was I really didn't have a preference. Like I didn't go there because I was like I loved hip hop.
Right.
I didn't I really wasn't hip on like the drum machines and syncing up all the gear and all that stuff. I really learned that there on the like when as soon as I got there, and it was like trial by fire again. It was like trying to figure out, like set up this SP1200 and this MPC 60 and sync them all together and make it all and sync it to the tape, and it was all a bunch of syncing and make it work. And it was a great learning environment. There was some incredible engineers there. Anton was one of them. Patrick Adams, Eli Tubo. Just incredible talent.
How old were you at the time?
Like 20.
Wow.
Yeah. So
I love stories like this. So how long were you in New York, and what brought you to LA?
So I worked there for a while. So when I was at Power Play, I was at that particular time I was working on a session. It was a group called Delight.
Right.
And we were doing a remix for one of their records. I want to say it was it was the first album for sure. It was the big album, and it was maybe like the fourth or fifth record off that album. So they came in, producers came in, and they were doing a remix, and it was like a 2-day session. It lasted forever, and we didn't really go home. It was just going on and on and on, and finally got to go home. And I went home, took a shower, just about to get in bed, and my phone rang, and I got a call from the studio saying, "Can you come back for a session, a mix?" And I go, I don't think I can. I said, I'm so tired right now. I said, I can't even see straight. And it was a producer named Herbie Azor, and he went by the name Herbie Lovebug, and he was one of the founders and the producer of Salt and Pepper, and Kid and Play and Kwame and a bunch of other, hip hop acts at the time, popular hip hop acts, and I was like, I would love to work with him. I don't think I can at this point. I said, I'm too tired, but let me get some sleep, and if you still can't find anybody, give me a call back. And I got a call back a few hours later, and they were like, he said he's worked with you before. He really would love to work with you, and he wanted you to do this project. And I said, okay, great. So I got up, took another shower, tried to wake up a little bit, and went in, and it was the remix for Let's Talk About Sex. So It was, one session turned into what are we doing tomorrow, and then that turned into what are we doing next week, and then what are we doing next month, and 10 years later we were still making records.
Your life is like the instruction manual for how to become a successful engineer.
Yeah, it's just it's that opportunity. You know, I always say it's that door of opportunity. You just kind of,
and recognizing it and going for it. A lot of people don't.
You know, you have
recognize
to. You have to. I never have a hard line on anything. It's probably, I'm Pisces, so so it's hard for me to say no to anything. But with you know, there's always a way to make it work. I always feel like there's always a way to make it work. So if we can compromise and I can get some sleep to try to, you know, get my senses back, then I can go in and do the session. And the session turned out to be probably the biggest session of my life.
Wow. So how long were you there, and did he bring you out here? How did you end up moving
No,
to LA?
we were making records out there. We built the studio out there. We made the next record, which was called Very Necessary, in his mother's garage. I bought a 24-track machine from Nashville. I flew it up. I drove it. I had it shipped back up here. Flew down there. I had it shipped back up here to New York, and had a little console there. I think it was called a soundtrack console, and had a technician come in, wire it, and we tracked the whole album in there, and then wound up having to mix it there as well, because when I gave the label all the rough mixes, we got them all approved, and then went into Power Play to mix, and when I started sending them the first couple mixes, they're like, wait, the sound was different. What happened to that sound? It was raw. It was kind of like, it was a cool sound. And I go, yeah, I can't do it on that console. I said, no automation on it. And they were like, well, how much would it cost to do put automation on the console? So they made me actually stop, put automation in the console.
On the soundtrack.
Yeah. It was a third-party automation system, and it was like I was mixing off a little console like this. Yeah.
That's a great story. Yeah. What year did you move to LA, and did you move out here for a studio gig?
No.
Once again, I'm just gonna go
there.
I
literally, I was. So that was about 10 years.
Oh wow.
About 10 years of working. We had a very small unit of people, so the management of the group, Salt and Pepper, being on the road, I was on the road with them all the time. So I did, you know, I was on the road with all their tours, when they would do spot dates, when they were doing world tours. I was always traveling. I had my gear with me all the time. We'd always.
So you were traveling with them to record them or do front of house stuff?
I was more of the MD, like basically running the show.
Okay.
So whatever's needed, you know, like, so
Right.
It was, you know, if I needed to be a tour manager one day, I was a tour manager. If I needed to be basically quality control, I was making sure if we're doing TV, the angles are right, the lighting is correct. If we, you know, the sound is always correct. So whatever was needed, it was just more of keeping it at a very high quality through their early, you know, their mid part of their career.
You must have really earned their trust.
Yeah, we became like a family. We were you know, we still are. We still always keep in touch. You know, everybody. It's a dysfunctional family in a lot of senses, but
aren't they all?
Yeah.
So how did you walk away from that? I mean, it sounds like such a cozy, you know, relationship and everything.
Everybody grows up, you know. And it was our early 20s, you know, to mid 20s. So everybody kind of, when we got through to about 99, everybody was ready to take a breath and just go, okay, let's chill for a second. It was a whirlwind. 10 years for me, 15 years for them. It was a whirlwind, 15 years for them. For me, it's 10 years, and I didn't know what I wanted to do anymore. I didn't know if I wanted to keep doing that. I wanted a break from it for a second. So I had gotten married in 96, and in 99, after a tour, my wife and I were just like, let's move out to LA. Just so, yeah, and my intention was to take a year off, and just kind of regroup, and we came out here, and my wife interviewed for a job. She got a job that she wanted, so I was going to take a year off, and I was just going to chill. And when I hit the ground out here, a friend asked me to do a favor and mix a song for a group called Bones Thugs and Harmony, and I did that. And one song turned into like 6 songs, and then I was done. Then I was like, okay, I need a break.
Yeah,
I don't want to do this anymore. So shortly after that, a person that I work with, Charlotte Blake at London Polygram, which was the label that Salt and Pepper was on. So she was the point person for the group, and me being the guy that dealt with all the production,
yeah.
I interfaced with her on a daily basis. So she had moved out here at the same time, and a friend of hers was the GM of a company called Radio and Records.
Oh yeah.
So they were,
which is Lenny Beer? Was that Radio and Records?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, Lenny Beer.
Confused him. Sorry. Go ahead. It was like Billboard, though, kind of like Billboard for the industry more.
Correct. It was radio charts, basically for the industry. So the label could figure out how many plays they were getting, what stations were playing their songs, how many times they were playing it, when they were playing it. So
they wanted to see if their payola was working or
it
not.
wasn't working or not, right? So so she gave me a call when I was out here, and she said that Radio and Records is starting this really cool endeavor, and their plan was to digitally distribute promotional music to radio stations, which had never been done before. So if you were a major label, and you wanted to get your material to a radio station, you'd have to basically go through the cost of pressing a CD, artwork, the whole 9 yards. Is like the same cost that would cost you to make an album,
yeah,
a CD album. It costs you to do
Promos.
one single, one promo, and then your shipping costs and all that. So Radio and Records felt like there was a better way of getting it there digitally.
That was pretty forward thinking.
It was cool. It was a very cool project. So that enticed me. I was like, okay, that would be great. I would love to do that. So I jumped on there, and I headed up that project for them. And it lasted for a little bit. It was during the years of Napster, so that was a little tougher environment. Couldn't get took a lot of trust to get the labels to sign off on having their material digitized.
Right,
and, yeah.
Going down a wire that anybody could hijack.
Correct.
And then take
Correct.
it to Napster.
But our system was really interesting. It was a joint venture with Liquid Audio.
Oh yeah,
remember Liquid Audio?
They were one of the first sponsors of the Road Rally back
really?
in the day.
Yeah, they were great company out in Redwood, California.
Yeah,
and they had some great technology where we could literally take rip a wave off a CD, or get it however. It was about 50 megs.
Okay.
You'd compress it down to about 4 or 5 megs, then be able to, because at the time, in 2000, no one had high-speed internet, right? So that was
bandwidth was expensive.
Bandwidth was expensive. So the challenge was to get that amount of data over the internet. So you compress it down, and then on the other end, whoever had the player could then take it and compress it back, uncompress it to about 45 megs. So it lost a little bit, but it was still super high quality. So we did that for a while successfully, and just fell victim to the environment. And then I transitioned into other things at Radio and Records, and did that for about 9 years.
Did you miss being in the studio?
I did. That was 2000. By about 2003, my son was born. And then I was getting the itch to kind of get back in the studio, so I built.
I hope your wife's not watching the show today.
No, not because he was born, but right prior to him being born, I'd built a little home studio, in a spare bedroom, and that became the nursery. So my gear had to come out, and it was in the living room, a large living room, but I had like a little corner to myself, and so that was good for a second until my son got mobile, and he started rewiring my studio every day.
One of my daughters actually put an ice cream sandwich in a VHS player.
There you go. I have those stories, those nightmares. So that's actually what wound up me here at Westlake. Was I was looking for a place that I could set my gear up in a room that was a little production room, a little writing room, and through a friend, Steve Resnick, who we had lunch, and he introduced me to somebody who then introduced me to Steve, and Steve and was looking to
as in Burdick.
So, yeah, Steve Burdick,
who's now his partner.
Yeah, is now my partner. And Steve was looking to rent out some of the offices upstairs in our other building as writing rooms. He said, there used to be a sales group up there.
Okay.
So the sales group dwindled down.
Did Steve Burdick own this place at that point?
No, he was looking to buy. Glenn Phoenix did. Glenn Phoenix still owned it. Yeah. Okay. So the story with Glenn was super interesting story. Is he started out making monitors, right? And then he built a studio around his monitors to demo his monitors, and that became the first Westlake studio.
And it was called Westlake Audio back then.
Westlake Audio,
which it's not now. Westlake Audio is a separate company that sells gear now.
Correct. And that room got super popular. Stevie Wonder went in, listened to the speakers, and loved it. So he mixed his record there. So then that was a mix room. That was over on Wilshire.
So Tom Hidley was designing the rooms?
I know Tom Hidley designed these two rooms. I'm not sure about that room.
Okay.
I'm not sure about that room. But
Glenn Phoenix must have been in some sort of relationship.
He was partners. He was a partner, yeah.
All right.
So Glenn was doing the monitors. Tom was kind of the studio design. And they both kind of did, they both kind of had their hand in everything.
And these monitors were unique at the time. And if I remember correctly, when they built this place, the idea was to have rooms that sounded the same, whether you were an A or B or C or D, that a label could send in an artist and a producer and an engineer, work in a room, take a month off, come back, you can't get that room, but you can work in the other room, it's going to sound the same.
Same thing, yeah.
Okay, which was pretty unique. I mean, it was desirable and everybody had the thought, but this was the place that pioneered that, right?
Yep.
So that's cool.
And the accuracy was super important to them. It was the accuracy of the audio in the room, from the listening position.
And they measured it. It was they would do it with white noise or pink noise and time delay, TDS, right? Time delay spectrometry or something like that.
They used to be in every room. They used to be built in.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you took the production room here, and then how did that translate into you and Steve Burdick eventually buying the place?
So about a few months into it, we became friends. We came down one day down the hall and said that he's thinking about buying the studio and was looking for investors, and did I know anybody? And in my mind, it was never even my intention to ever buy the studio. Like, I wasn't even thinking about it. It's like, who do I know that would want to buy a studio?
I would think you would need millions of dollars to buy it.
Yeah, and I just kind of felt, and so I looked at his business plan, and his business plan was first set up to get investment money and then pay that investment money back. But as you can remember, that time, studios were dropping like pretty much every week,
right?
Several a week.
Big studios, big brand name studios that everybody knew.
They were. It was like you'd get a notification that another big studio kind of closed its doors, in a bad way too. It was like people showed up and the doors were locked and no one was opening.
Somebody came in with snips and took the console, and repoed the console.
So I kind of looked at the business plan. And I said, the only way this would work is if you had a business partner that was looking to do production. So I kind of did the numbers, and I was like, if I were to come in, instead of me spending money on studio time, why don't I just spend money to buy the studio, and then I'd have a place to work, and I'd just kind of float around the rooms. So that's what we did. Pretty simple. I'm
amazed that, like Bruce Swedien, who engineered all the Michael Jackson stuff. I mean, they're the who's who of the industry worked in this place. I'm surprised none of those guys stepped up. Lucky you, once again, opportunity.
I think so, and I think people. It was an environment where people were really scared about buying a studio. So no one was really like. It really was. It really was the perfect situation. Like, it was.
Why weren't you scared?
I was scared, but I was young, so I was kind of like, if it didn't work, I'd do something else. It wasn't anything that it was money. It was just money and time.
Wow, I wish I had that part of you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
that was ballsy.
I think my 20s, I lived it a certain way, and I just had more. And I had support from my wife. I had support from my father-in-law, who was like, "Just go do it." What I'm here to back you. If you fall, we'll see if we can get you back up.
How did your parents feel about you not going into the trades and choosing the studio business? Were they like?
My father died when I was 18, so he never got to see me going into the music business. My mother, again, super supportive. She was. My family as a whole were like, "What do you mean making records? Like, are you crazy?" Because coming from an Italian family, it was like, if you can't hold it and feel it, it's not real, right? So if you can build a house or wire a house or wire a light or whatever, you can always fall back on that. You can always get in the union and ride that wave for a long time. So that was always a fallback plan. It was never. I never felt like anything I ever did was a fatal situation, because I could always do something.
Hey, you've always struck me as a very pragmatic guy.
Yeah, I always figure out a way to land on my feet. So I never really felt like if it didn't work out, I'd be in a lot of trouble. So and if you look at like the timeline, there was always a little overlap. So when I came out to LA, the Radio and Records gig fell in my lap right away, right within the first 6 months. So I was doing that, and then 2004 was when this came about. So, and I didn't leave R&R. My the CEO over there, Erica Farber, who was another mentor of mine, she's like, you have a very particular skill set of creative, business-minded, creative, and technical. It's going to be hard to kind of replace that. So you have a certain set of responsibilities. I'm not going to micromanage you. Just get them done. And if you get them done in this office, or you get them done in your office, or wherever, just get it done. So she kind of gave me that leadway to be able to do that. So buying the studio, I was still there. I was still on payroll there.
Nice.
So I never really had that fatal, like, oh my gosh, if this doesn't work out, I'm in trouble, because I was still doing that.
Were all the rooms up? I mean, with the exception of some of the smaller production rooms, were the big rooms? Did this place occupy 2 locations?
Yes.
At the time that you bought in?
Yes.
Wow.
It was big. It was a big jump. Steve started interning here in 87, right? In 87. So he knew the place really, really well, inside and out. There were things that I saw happening that I was like, if we turn this around, I'm sure we can turn it around, right? Like, because it was
like, give me an example.
Just aesthetics wise, it was more linoleum tile and white walls when we bought it, versus polished concrete floors and warm colors and kind of like the lounges look like a living room.
It feels like home.
That's right.
Within a very, very professional vibe.
Right. Well, it didn't then. It was more of a corporate environment, right? And that's where I kind of came in. I was like, if I would want to make a record, I want to be in a place where I'm comfortable. I don't want to be in a place where where I feel like it's an office.
So not only did you take on the giant nut of paying for all this real estate, and I'm guessing leases on big consoles, and I mean,
well, that's the interesting thing. Like I said, the deal was a perfect deal because Glenn owned all that,
okay.
right? So he had all that. So there wasn't the deal was just between Steve, myself, and Glenn, right? And there was only one console still with a lease that we paid off, that we were paying off as we went. So the other consoles were all owned by Glenn. So our monthly nut had to basically go to Glenn. So we cut a deal, and he made it super easy for us to get in.
Wow.
Yeah, he was amazing. And with him it was more of I know the place is going to be in good hands because I'm he didn't know me, but we got to know each other really well very quickly. And he knew Steve for years, and Steve came up as a intern and runner, and basically was managing the place. He was a VP of operations. So, who better to trust the legacy with? So
it does have a legacy, you know. So many of the big studios have gone out of business, big name places, and it's heartbreaking for guys like us. I'm sure that when you've heard of other studios going out, you're not thinking, all right, more business for us. It's almost like a funeral every time you find out.
No, it's not like that. It's not about like, oh, we have more. We have plenty of business. We're blessed. It's a great thing, and we never take it for granted. We always want to we want our customers walking out the door as satisfied as ever. But when a competitor goes out of business, you don't look at it like great. You look at it like, damn, I wish I could have helped. I wish there was something I could have done.
There's a brotherhood among studio rats, whether you're an owner or a runner, and anything in between. There's definitely a brotherhood. Let's talk about that brotherhood for a moment. Something that you and I've talked about before, and I think I've probably mentioned on the show to you guys as well, is that working in a home studio, you're very isolated, and you can learn from other people, but you're learning on the internet, so you don't really know who you're learning from.
That's right.
You don't know. It sounds good when you see it on Gear Sluts or whatever, but you don't know. And you may try it, and you still don't know because you don't know. Am I just making myself happy? Have I convinced myself this sounds great because they said it would on a forum somewhere? Or does it actually? Well, in a place like this, you've got multiple engineers, multiple producers, multiple assistants, and they're all around each other all the time trading licks. And there's this sense of brotherhood and generosity, and everybody delights in everybody else's success.
That's right.
Kind of not unlike the Taxi Road Rally. I've seen that same vibe there, and it tickles me that it's turned out that way. You go into the kitchen, and you're making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich at 2 o'clock in the morning, and you're a famous rock star, and another famous rock star comes in there to grab a beer, and you end up hanging out and playing some pinball, and before you know it, that rock star is playing on this rock star's record.
Yeah, happens all the time.
Yeah, and
or they just hear it. The doors open and they hear what's going on in the other room, and if they know each other, like sometimes they'll ask who's in that room, and you'll say, okay, so and so, and they'll be like, oh, can you let them know I'm here? I'm in the other room, and then they just, oh, come on in, listen to this, and all of a sudden it turns into a collaboration.
I actually had Bob Clearmountain walk into a control room that I was working in one day, and he said, how did you get that drum sound? It was the high point of my entire engineering career that Bob Clearmountain wanted to know. I got the drum sound. But that stuff happens in places like this all the time.
That's right.
And so they've got an assistant here, a young man named Gio that I met once before when I was here. And as I was packing up to leave last time, I said to him, do you realize how lucky you are to work here? And he goes, yeah, I do. And I can see that he gets it, because what you're exposed to in a facility like this, nobody can get being isolated in home studios. And I just love the fact that the craft is
it's
perpetuated.
Alive,
Not just alive, but being spread around. So,
we have that's really what it comes down to. We built an aesthetics here where it feels like a living room. Everything's warm. Everything is inviting. There's nothing where it feels like it's off-putting. Other than that, the gear that we have is the gear that everyone else has, right? Like we don't have anything special. We don't have a special magic box that other people don't have privy to. It really just comes down to how well maintained the gear is, how clean the gear is, and how well of a service the staff provides. And it goes all the way through from the booking process all the way through to the end when you get your files. Are the files named correctly? Are they named in a certain way? And we do all that. We're very particular about all that every step of the way.
And is there like a formal training program for the kids that come on board here, or is it just handed down from one generation to the next because the previous generation really gets it?
A little bit of each, a little bit of that, a little bit of both. So what we do here is everyone comes on as an intern. We only have a 3-month internship, so we hear stories of other studios, having people intern for free for like a year and never getting in the rooms, and we don't believe in that. I believe, my personal belief is time is something you don't ever get back, so don't waste it, right? So if we can't get a good look at somebody in their first 3 months on if they're on time, if they hold themselves well, if they're always motivated, then
And do they have a Honda Prelude?
And they have a Honda Prelude. I love that car. So we get a good look at them in 3 months, and if it's something that we see that fits our business model, we usually hire them. If it's not a great fit, we let them know it's not a great fit. Sometimes we hire people and we find out it's not a great fit afterwards, and it's always upon hiring them, I'll always tell them, I will let you know as soon as we feel like it's not a good fit, because the last thing I want to do is have you waste your time. And that doesn't mean that you should stop what you're doing. It just means that this isn't a good fit, right? So maybe a 2-room facility might be a good fit, a one-room facility, but 8 or 9 rooms is a little, sometimes is not for everybody.
And is it safe to say that personality and attitude plays into it almost as much as the technical chops?
Absolutely.
I mean, you've got to have.
I mean, we've had people that were hired that just had a great smile, was a great person, had great energy, and never went to school. Didn't really have understanding of the gear at all, and we'll teach you all that. That's what we do, and that's our environment here is a learning environment. And we almost sometimes rather being able to teach from the ground floor up, and build that foundation correctly, because even when somebody does come from a school or has somewhat of a background, I always believe, from being a builder, I always believe going down to the foundation. Yep. Right, and building it the right way, because if you build the foundation correctly, you can build anything on top of it. Right, there's nothing that's going to come, but if the foundation's wrong, whatever you build on top has the possibility of coming down. Yeah. If the foundation's wrong, right? So I always believe, Steve and I always feel the same way, is like go right back down to the bottom, and how are you cleaning glass, and how are you cleaning floors, and how are you, and all that plays into the next steps of the evolution of being a second engineer, or being a first engineer. That mindset of making sure the glass, when you leave a piece of glass, there's no fingerprints on it, there's no dust on it, there's no fibers from the fabric, from the thing that you're cleaning it with. It translates into that I get the best vocal sound, that are my tracks labeled correctly? Are my sessions, are they organized correctly, where the drums are all in one area, and and all that?
The smile on my face is actually hurting right now hearing you say this stuff.
I mean, it starts there.
That's the way I was trained as well, down to my printing on tape boxes. Yeah. If your printing wasn't good,
that's right,
you didn't graduate to the next level. That's right. Because if you can't pass that ethos onto the next kid who's behind you, then the studio's going to have crappy looking tape box labels that are going to end up in another studio when they go there to overdub or something.
That's right.
And your reputation hinges, believe it or not, on the printing on a tape box label. And when you start talking about leaving lint on a piece of glass,
well, the label, or when you open up a tape box and you see this, see the track sheet, and if it looks like, okay, I it's going to take me half an hour to even figure out what's happening here first before I can get into the session, or you open it up and it's like, you hear the and everything is labeled beautifully, and the handwriting's right, and it and it's you've got tones on the tape and all that. Like it's all a beautiful thing when back in those days, right? And we have those things happening now where we feel like there is that that what we would call is the 10%, 80%, right?
Mm-hmm.
So which is usually people will complain when something is let's call it 20-20-60, okay? 20, if you walk into a restaurant and your service is really, really bad, you might complain to a manager, right? Mm-hmm. Or you might leave less of a tip. If your service was okay, you're probably just expecting it to be okay, mm-hmm. right? If your service is exceptional, you might even call a manager over or tip higher or whatever. So that 20% on the top end, that 20% on the bottom end are where people react, right? That 60% in the middle, the 60 in the middle, people just they don't see. So we always tell people, if you're going to be in that 20% on the low side, you don't belong here. If you're going to be in that 60% in the middle, people aren't going to remember you. They're not going to. There's not going to be anything that stands out about you. Is your goal every day is to be in that 20% on top, so that when people leave here, they go, "Who's your name?" And it's happening right now. Like I'm even looking at some emails, and we have a client in that's been in for a while, and we have a younger, one of the younger second engineers on that session. Not younger age-wise, but just younger in experience. Yeah. And that person has an engineer that can't make it every day, so they're asking for him to. But the personality is great, mm-hmm. right? And his technical is good. His technical is above average. Our when we say above average here or good here is probably an engineer everywhere else. Mm-hmm. But for us, it's like we want it to be exquisite, right?
You're looking for fighter pilots,
correct?
Not
correct.
Guys that can fly a Cessna.
So that person, that the engineer that can't make it, is just basically saying, I'm not looking for another engineer. Why don't you just jump in mm-hmm. when our engineer can't make it? And that's where people get their opportunity.
Absolutely. I remember being taught how to wrap a mic cable, and there is a particular way to wrap a mm-hmm. mic cable. Mm-hmm. You roll it with your thumb mm-hmm. and your index finger so that every layer of that coil doesn't tangle when you uncoil it.
Throw it.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. So, see, everybody who grew up in this environment knows this, and the reason it's important is that you're in the room, and whoever that multi-platinum artist is on the other side of the glass has an inspiration and is walking across the room to pick up an acoustic guitar, and you don't have an 87 set up to record that, and the engineer looks at you, and before the engineer even says anything, you're already 1 foot out the door mm-hmm. to go throw a cable across the room mm-hmm. and get an 87 plugged in and on that acoustic guitar. Right. And if that cable knots up and mm-hmm. you're sitting there screwing around with it, you might blow that inspiration.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And that's really the magic of what we do here. Is basically when you walk in, even our common areas, we keep them. We're always telling our team members, the kitchen areas for the clients. Keep get in, get out, be quiet. Don't be in there and don't be loud, because coming from the studio environment, I know firsthand that. If I was in a room for hours and I'm like, I want to clear my head a little bit, I'm gonna go get a cup of coffee or a tea or whatever, or some water from the kitchen. I'm walking out of the room. I'm not then all of a sudden thinking about, like, I gotta change the tires on my car, or I'm still thinking about what's going on in the room. I just took a break from it a second. I'm taking a little distance from it. So you're still in thought, right? And then in that process, you don't want to walk into a kitchen and have the employees or the team members kind of hooting around and laughing, and you still want that person in their mindset, still able to not have their creativity broken, or smells or other things. We keep it very neutral. We try to keep the scents where it's vanilla, or it's a clean scent. It's not anything that where you walk in and it's like, there's a scent of lily, and I don't like lilies, right? And then all of a sudden, believe it or not, the creative person's like, that bothers me. Like, I can't really do anything now.
In most studios, even some of the best that I've been in, smell like beer, weed, and cigarettes from a week ago.
Yeah.
This place doesn't.
Yeah, we try hard. we have filters going all the time, and we're spraying it all the time, and we do the best we can.
I remember somebody once taught me, make sure the sugar container in the break room is always filled.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, why? And they said, because if Eric Clapton walks out of the studio and he's making a cup of coffee, if he's got to go find somebody to get more sugar in that thing, you've taken him out of that headspace.
That's right.
So, man,
our assistants or our second engineers are always close to the room, where if someone asks for privacy, they'll stay out of the room. If they don't ask for privacy, they're in the room. They're engaged all the time. If they're outside the room, they're right near the door, so that the client don't have to walk out and search, because then that takes you out of that creativity. And if you're having a problem, if technical problems start to happen in the room, then you're already kind of wound up and frustrated, right? So then to try to find your assistant in a big facility is another frustration. Right? So it's like, if you walk away from the door, let them know exactly where you're going to be, so they know exactly where to go to find you. So it's those little things that kind of, like, just from experience, I would say we build into the process here, to where I think our clients come in and they feel like we have a different experience here than in most places, in other places. So when they have that different experience, and they realize the quality of the material that comes out during that process, and that level of comfort that they get when they come, I think it translates, and I think that's why they come back.
Wow. I'm so happy that we know each other. We get to talk about this stuff, because I've walked into other places, Power Station in New York, one of the great studios of the world. It's now called Avatar. It's just a totally A-plus studio. But the culture there was different. The culture amongst the engineers was, look at me, I work at the Power Station, I'm a rock star.
Yeah.
The sugar wasn't always filled.
That's right.
And it's amazing. You can feel it when you walk in this place. Like right now, I'm looking over the top of the laptop at the outboard rack, and there's like a tabletop on top of it. Everything is stacked up perfectly. There's 3 bottles of water in a triangle. There's a notepad with Post-it notes on top of it, tissues, a pencil container. Everything is orderly and not messed up at all.
That's right.
And I bet that it looks like this every single time you walk in the room.
That's the way a room is reset.
You guys should be proud of that. Yeah. That's a good job.
And you know what? Our team is proud, right? They when they come in here, they realize when they walk through the door, that feeling they got when they first walked through the door is what we all try to maintain throughout.
It's on their shoulders now,
right? And they I always say we're in a baton, we're in a relay race, right? We're all in a race, right? And we're in a relay race. So your shift is going to hand the baton off to somebody else. So how are you going to hand that baton off? Is your job done? Are you going to be able to, are you going to hand that baton off to where you lost, ground? And then that person's going to have to make up that ground with the stuff you didn't do or didn't do well, and then get their own work done. So, you always want to realize that we're all in this race together. So when you hand that baton off, try to be a little ahead of the game. Try to have it a little easier for that person, because it'll come back around to you.
Anticipate.
That's right. Yeah.
You've got to have eyes in the front and the back of your head, anticipation, knowing what other people around you, because you're not there as the assistant engineer to be cool or to voice an opinion about a part on a record or a sound.
No, it's actually a skill set that we could have young men and women that are really super technical, really knowledgeable. That doesn't mean that they're going to make a great assistant. Mm-hmm. They might make a great engineer, but the path here is through the assistant, right? It's through the second engineer, because that's where you get exposure to so many different engineers and so many different clients, and that's where you make your connections. So you have to be, your goal is to be a good second engineer here, right? And just because you're technical and you know your stuff doesn't mean that you're going to make a good second engineer here. So we always have to balance that. We always have to make sure that personality, like you said before, personality is a big part of it, because you're going to get the best and the worst. It's not always roses. People don't always roll in with their own engineer, and that engineer is a great engineer. Sometimes they roll in with their own engineer, and that engineer was working out of their bedroom the day before, or the week before, the month before, the year before. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a matter of maybe they're just not knowledgeable to the studio environment, right? So how that second engineer of ours interacts with that person is huge, because in the music industry, most people are insecure about something, right? We live in we work
creative types. Yeah.
We work in an industry of insecurity, right? And if somebody is having trouble routing something or figuring out how to get a sound up on a console, it's how that second engineer approaches that person and either supports them and makes them look like a rock star, or makes them feel like they don't know what they're doing, right? And that's not gonna cut it here. We have to make them. Our job is to make you feel like a rock star.
Yep.
And that's what that's what we do every day.
And sometimes you have to take the fall for them.
And sometimes you do. That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. Sometimes I always tell our senior second engineers that are pretty much engineering half of the time and then assisting half of the time. They're at the point where they're having to get coffee and meals put together for people that sometimes they know more than the person sitting in the engineering seat. But you'll learn. So I always say, you could learn just as much about what not to do from someone who's not that great as you can from someone who's great, and learning what to do, right? Like, so it's all about what you want to get out of that day when you walk in here. So if you happen to get a challenging engineer, stick by that person, and at the end of the session, did you make that person, and did you make the session successful, and did you make that person look and feel like a rock star? And if you did, you did your job.
So I've got to imagine transitioning now to these guys own a side company, for lack of a better
side
term.
project.
It's called Create Music Academy, and they came on board as a sponsor, I think 3 years ago at the Taxi Road Rally, and I was just infatuated with them because I could feel this studio vibe and ethos emanating from Doug Fensky, who is the head of teaching. I forget his name.
Director of education.
Okay, so I said it a little less.
And he's our business partner as well.
So he came up through the ranks here, didn't he?
He did.
And you can feel that.
He was one of our early employees, probably around 2005, and started as an intern and just had that gift of organization, and quickly became a day runner, which basically was an office runner, which was responsible for organizing the daytime activities here, which was interviewing interns and making sure rooms were set, and so he started there, and then when I first bought the place, I was telling you my thing was, the reason I bought the place was I was doing artist development, and I was doing production. So we had a whole artist development program that I was working on a daily basis. And after his shift, he'd jump in with me. And, you know, at first it was like, you know, can I sit in? And I was like, sure, of course, sit in. And then it was, you know, why are you sitting there? Come over here and, you know, engineer. And he's like, me? Like, now? Like, you want me to engineer? And I was like, yeah, come on. Just the way Frank Diaz told me, you know, we're not you know, they're not doing brain surgery here.
Right.
It's just, if you mess up, we'll fix it. So
it's an operating room environment, but we never kill a patient.
That's right. We haven't killed anybody yet. So, so with that, he'd show up every day, you know, and it was like, it was night after night, and we'd work, and he'd get out at 2 and 3 in the morning, and sometimes we'd have to drive him to a bus stop because his regular bus isn't running. At first he had a car, and that car broke down, and then he lived all the way in North Hollywood. And when that car broke down, he never stopped like, oh, I don't have a car now, so I can't do it anymore. He still stayed. He took a bus back and forth, and he might stay till 3 in the morning, and next morning he was here right on time, 9 o'clock. Took the bus in and got himself up, and so
he recognized the value of the opportunity.
Absolutely, and he put the work in, you know, and he's a gifted. The other part of it is that not only is he a great engineer and producer and all that, he's gifted at teaching, right? So not everybody can say that. Like I don't know if I'd be a gifted teacher in front of a classroom. I'm not sure about that.
I think,
you know, maybe I'd enjoy it. You know, I'd enjoy parts of it, but he just enjoys teaching. He enjoys that whole that whole aha moment when you can see the light bulbs going off in everybody, and they're like, oh, I get it now.
So explain what Create does that other schools don't. Why is the approach here different? Because we've had some taxi members that after the road rally ended up coming to Create, and they sent me emails just saying it was everything I'd hoped it would be and more, in short.
Great.
And they went in with high expectations and had them exceeded. So what is it that you're doing differently than other schools?
I think what we're doing is we're taking everything we do on a daily basis at the studios, and we've boiled it down into a very accelerated curriculum. We don't want other schools have people attending for like a year. We don't feel like that's going to help anyone but the school, you know. And we don't believe in the whole student loan process as well, because a year, you know, $40,000, $50,000, and then you get out and you might not get the job that you thought you were going to get, you know, and there's nobody, you know, looking for engineers necessarily. You have to then start this process as being an intern again and get into a studio and become and work your way through to become an engineer. So having to go to school for a year and spend all that money, and then you get out of school and you're not equipped to necessarily walk into a position. You have to then kind of grow into a position again. We just feel like that whole business model is just a little broken for us, right? Because we're getting those young men and women in our doors at the studio,
right? Seeing the result of the other schools,
and we're seeing them come out of the other schools, and there are schools that are really good. There are schools that are good, and we kind of focus on those, and we try to get as many through the door from those schools, and those schools are more focused on engineering, right? Like it's all about the race you're in too, right? Because if you want to be a producer, then going through the process of interning and running and all that. That might be the wrong race for you, right? If you want to be a producer, because the people that are next door that are interns and runners and in the shop and second engineers, they want to be engineers, right? And maybe they'll become a producer at some point.
This goes back to what you said about the guy who you drove to the interview for. What
Correct.
Ended up being
he was going to be an artist,
right?
It wasn't right for him.
Yeah,
so,
he was in the wrong race, and you found your race. You got in your lane and stayed there.
Because if you're in the right race, then you're going to compete, right? If you're a sprinter and you enter yourself into a marathon, you expect the results to be good. It's not going to happen, right? Or if you're a marathon runner and you're like, okay, I just entered the 100 meter, it's not going to work out for you, right? Because you don't have 4
Right.
hours to make it happen. So the goal is to get yourself in the right race, and we're very particular about who we bring in. So when they come in the door next door, they might have come out of school. What is it that you want to do? Do you want to be an engineer? Because if you want to be an engineer, we'll get you there. If you want to be a great guitar player, or you want to have your own, you want to be a producer, and you don't want to engineer, you're not going to be grinding like the other 15 people that you're in the race with.
So Create actually has different paths that you can take?
Create is just specifically for what it appeals to the most is music producers, artists, and songwriters, right? And for different reasons. It's the same curriculum, but if you come in as a music producer, songwriter, or artist, you will obtain what you want to obtain from that curriculum. And here's why. The curriculum is built around music production from the beginning of a song all the way through to mixing and mastering, right? And if you come in from the lens of a music producer, you will learn exactly everything you need to do to produce a well-produced and recorded song.
Which sounds like a miraculous feat and accomplishment in the short amount of... Tell them how long the courses are.
The courses are each there's 4 courses. Each course is basically 15 hours. So if you're taking it full time, 3 hours a day for lecture, 15 hours goes by in 1 week, right? But it's intense. It's not like we're not sitting around and we're not having tea time in the middle of you get this 3-hour lecture and there's 10 minutes on top of each hour. It's all constructed very particular, and we expect you to be on time. And we have projects and for you to exercises for you to work on, and
hands-on,
and we grade them. Yeah, we're telling you exactly what we want you to do, because we want you to hit certain points in the curriculum that we're teaching you, and we grade you on that. And if you don't do it well, we're showing you why you didn't do it well and how to do it well, so that when you get to that point of like you're past the whole lecture stage, now it just becomes a time for practice. You've already done it. You've already seen it done. It's in your notes, correct? You've seen it done. You've done it physically. You've gotten coached with it if you haven't done it correctly. And now it's time to practice it.
We're getting close to the end of the show, so I want to wrap up the discussion about Create with a compliment for you guys. And then I want you to tell me one juicy studio story, without any names, of course. Our next door neighbor, up until about 9 months ago, they had a son who was autistic, high functioning, but autistic. And so I knew the kid a little bit as he was growing up. And then about 2 or 3 years ago, the dad called me up one night and said, "Can I bring my kid over for a little industry coaching? He would like to get into the industry." And he said, "Should he go to a school or not?" And I said, "Most schools I would not recommend, but there is one that's local that I would highly recommend, because I know the people, I know their ethic, and the way they've designed their courses is spectacular. So yes, go there, you will not be disappointed." And he did. And I never really heard anything more from him other than the dad saying to me, yeah, he really liked it and felt that it was fruitful. It's good. About right before the fires last November, so right mid-November, they sold their house and they moved to North Carolina, and the kid showed up. He's now a young man. He's like 18 years old, 19 years old. He showed up to help his folks pack up the house, and I ran into him in our driveway. I said, "So what's going on?" He goes, "Oh man, I've been so busy." I said, "Doing what?" He goes, "Oh, I've been writing with Kris Kristofferson." I almost fell down. It's like, yeah, right. You're right. No, seriously. I'm writing with Kris Kristofferson. I've been locked away with him for months, and like his whole life changed because of what he learned from you guys.
That's great. That's
so
great story.
I mean, it doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a kid that if he had not figured out what he wanted to do with his life and ended up learning kind of the fast track on how to do it. I mean, the kid had a learning disability, you know? I mean, and now he's writing with Kris Kristofferson. So.
I mean, it's just what we teach is just the right way to do it. You know, what has been successful in our years of experience, we teach you the way to do that, and how to get a certain sound, and how to correctly process audio. Now, that's just the beginning. You know, if you look at, we always say, if you look at Michael Jordan or you look at Kobe Bryant, someone taught them at some point how to correctly shoot a jumper, or how the correct way of a layup, right?
Foundation,
right? But then it was up to them to put in the next 10,000 hours on how, like, I'm going to keep doing that. I'm going to keep shooting that jumper. I'm going to keep, going in and practicing that layup. And that's really what it comes down to, is when we teach them the correct way and give them the notes, and some people walk away with they put it all in a binder, and we suggest they put it in a binder, and they walk away with a book. It's basically their manual to figure out how to build a song. And then it comes to practice, and we one of the I think the special things that we have going on is we have this hashtag that the actual student producers created, and it's called Create Fam, right? And they, once they're done with the courses, they're not done. We're one of the things that we're trying to do is we're trying to build community. So they're always coming back. They're always using the facility in between classes, or when a current student isn't in the lab or the studio, they have the access to book it and use it. And what happens is when they come back, they'll have questions like, hey, how do I get this certain bass sound, or how do I do this? Or if, let's say, they're not local, they'll usually send it to us, and they'll say, hey, I'm trying to get this certain bass sound. What do you think? Okay, try this, or maybe here's a couple of suggestions. So there's never a time when it's like, okay, your classwork is done here, and okay, good, you're out the door.
Right,
and
we cut the cord and you're
yeah,
on your
no,
own.
it really is. That's where it begins. That's where the process begins.
Do you think it's possible, maybe, that after this year's road rally, that the Monday immediately after the road rally, for people that are seriously thinking about taking the courses, that you guys could have like an open house and have Doug do like a 90-minute class in the facility, so they can get a little taste of what they would get?
Sure, yeah. I mean, whatever they would need to kind of get a taste for it, it'd be fine.
That would be awesome, because some of the people that taxi members have taken it are from out of town, and that's a big leap of faith for them to come to town for a number of weeks, get an Airbnb.
Right.
But I know from the emails that I've gotten from taxi members and our next door neighbor, I know it works. I'm not plugging it. You know me, I don't plug anything I don't really believe in. And you've heard this guy for 90 minutes now. Would he create a piece of shit? No.
And thank you for that. But one of the things that we did is once we linked it to Westlake, we were very careful. We didn't come out of the gate blazing like, hey, we're here. And we actually did the road rally, our first road rally, in 2014. Right before we opened our doors, and it was in November, right? So November, and then we opened our doors in January, and our first class was a small class. Our first class was maybe 4 or 5 people, and we still keep in touch with them all today. And they came from the road rally, and they're doing cool things. They're what we wanted to do was make sure the curriculum was standing on its own, and that was a very important thing for us when we linked it to Westlake, is we wanted to make sure we didn't want to just become another school that's like, okay, good, we're profiting off of these people that have this dream, and we're putting making our pockets fatter, but the dream isn't being accomplished. right? That's the cycle we were trying to break, and we didn't want that. So we came out very quiet and under the radar, and we went through a few cycles of cohorts, and we were sure that the curriculum stood on its own.
Proof of concept.
And we changed. Our curriculum is always evolving. It's never always the same. It's never the same twice, believe it or not, because the charts change, and we always are focusing on certain things about the charts and the trends and the new gear that we're using in the studio. So our curriculum is always what I call organic. It's always evolving, right? And with that, we wanted to make sure that the foundations of that curriculum stood on its own, and we've had enough cycles go through now that we're 100% confident that if you come through the cycle of the courses, you will walk away with the skill set that you didn't have prior to coming in.
And you can't really teach it online because you're not hands-on.
It's really hard to do it. I'd love to be able. We're trying to figure out a hybrid of some sort that would be able to accommodate some people that can't get to LA. But it's really hard, and it'd have to be the right scenario. And I'd always, I'd call on people like you and other people that I trust their opinion. Once if we find the right formula, we'll send it through its course first, and see if it's got legs, to be able to stand up on its own. But it would kind of be it would be kind of a light course. It wouldn't be necessarily the intense course that we have in person, because it's what when you're dealing with sound, it's so hard to be able to explain, okay, this is what it should sound like, because our environment sounds a certain way, your room might sound a different way, so you're listening to a bass, and we might be listening to a bass on our side, and we're listening to certain characteristics of it, and we're trying to tell you about that, and you're listening to it on your end, and maybe it's not going to translate the right way.
Speaking of hearing things in a room, last time I was here, Al played me, I think, 2 Michael Jackson songs from Thriller.
Probably Human Nature. It was over in that room.
Yeah, in Studio A.
Yeah, that's my favorite song in that room.
Oh my God! Yeah. I mean, come on! I've worked in some of the best rooms in the world, but to hear a Michael Jackson record in a room where it was done, I didn't think I would be nearly as impressed as I was, but there were layers in that record that I'd never heard before, right? Even wearing headphones.
Yeah.
It was astonishing.
That Human Nature and Thriller in A, and Man in the Mirror in Studio D, and Bad is always a good one to listen to in there. People always walk away going, I never heard that in the record. That must be a different record. I'm like, it's coming right off the album.
A couple of years ago, I got to hear Sgt. Pepper in a blacked out movie theater with in Dolby Atmos. Mm-hmm. And the first couple of tracks, I was like, yeah, it sounds good. And the whole room was all audio engineers. And by the end of the record, you could literally hear like the fingerprints on Paul McCartney's fingers as he was playing bass. It was astonishing.
Really?
Yeah.
You just felt like you were right there?
Literally, like Paul McCartney was standing in front of you.
That's awesome.
It was amazing. And it didn't feel like a science project. It still felt like music. So I'm hoping that they do that with the stuff that they've done now, that they do Abbey Road in Atmos, and I get invited back to that thing. Okay, one good, because we're a few minutes over, but one good studio story could be like something that
it'll be a funny story, actually.
Okay.
It's a Paul I'll just ride off the Paul McCartney thing.
Okay.
So Paul McCartney was doing a record with us a few years back. My daughter was probably 6 or 7, maybe 5 or 6, maybe, right? Young. She was still young. And she was sitting at the front desk. And her thing was, she'd come in and she'd want to be at the front desk, and she was sitting there with a bowl of Fruit Loops with no milk, just eating the Fruit Loops. So he comes through the door, and he had a granddaughter about her age at the time. And so he immediately goes right over to her, and he's like, "Hey, young lady, what's your name?" And she's like, "Gianna." And he's like, well, my name is Paul. How you doing? And she's like, well, and he's like, can I have some of your Fruit Loops? And she's like, can I have a green Fruit Loop? And so she says yes, and she gives him the bowl, and he takes a green Fruit Loop, and he goes on to the studio, and everybody is like having a, like, oh my God, you missed. I was up in my office, and he's like, you missed it. It was so awesome. And so then I walk down, I scoop up my daughter, and we go to a party where my son and my wife were already at, right? For a friend of ours, a birthday party. And so we come in the front door, and my daughter sees my wife at the end of the hallway, and she runs down the hallway, and I'm still at the door saying hi to somebody, and so my wife says to her, how was your day at the studio with your dad? And she was telling her about the story about her day. And so my wife comes up to me a little later on in the party, and she's like, what's going on at the studio? What, are you having problems over there? And I go, no, what happened? She's like, Gianna was telling me that there was beetles. The beetles were eating her Fruit Loops. So I had to tell her. I said, no, a beetle, because on the way to the party, she was telling me that this old guy was eating her Fruit Loops. And I said to her, well, you know who that is? I said, that's the guy who sings one of your songs that you like is Strawberry Fields. And she was like, oh, he doesn't look like that anymore. And I go, no, because she saw that she was looking at the video. So I said, no, he's in a group called the Beatles. So when she went to my wife, she told her that a beetle was eating her Fruit Loops. That awesome. That was her translation of the day.
Wow. It's so much nicer to hear stories like that rather than drug overdoses.
Yeah, we try to keep ourselves. We've had a couple rough situations around, but no, we're good.
Have I ever told you a story about the control room window that was shot out when I showed up for work one night in bullet hole in meter number 18?
No, oh my gosh.
I'll tell you that at dinner.
Okay.
All right. Well, with that, thank you, Al. This has been delightful, for lack of any better word. I love coming over here. I love hanging out with you, man. We are twin sons, different mothers, and I'm proud of what you've done with this place.
Thank you.
And the fact that it's it's perfect.
Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations. You guys, next week, I am doing the ultimate remote. I am going to Nampa, Idaho for next week's Taxi TV, and I'm going to be doing it in an outdoor tool shed. So if you can figure out what that means, don't miss next week's episode. If you are into doing instrumental music for film and TV, mostly like instrumental cues that would get used in reality TV, do not miss next week's show, okay? Awesome. With that, thank you, Al.
Thank you.
And let's cue the band.
All right.
And we will see you guys next week for another exciting episode of Taxi TV Live. Woo!